for a particular issue. So for example, we're currently running a gemstone on generating and increasing marketing ROI. We've done a webinar, the client was very excited, and now we have got an opportunity to have a 90-minute session with maybe a marketing leader and a couple folks that know something about analytics or data or something. And now what we're going to do is we're going to share our perspective of what is IBM's perspective on how analytics supports decision making. So I'm going to have you guys be the audience. You're now the marketing organization for a large multinational corporation. And we're going to be talking about the application of marketing and analytics. That's sort of who your audience is going to be. So I will spin into character, because Jonathan likes to see me do that, and then we will start our meeting. So thanks for joining me here today in our briefing and just to hear a little bit about IBM's point of view on analytics and decision making, specifically to the marketing organization. We talk to a lot of clients who are highly focused on increasing their marketing ROI. And they're struggling because they've got their product marketing organization figuring out what products to deal with. The demand organization is trying to balance between their email channels and their direct mail campaigns and their phone banks. All of these areas have investment areas, and they're struggling with how can they squeeze as much performance out of these businesses as they can. And many organizations are realizing if they turn to analytics and apply that to their data, they can really gain a lot of value. So oftentimes in these conversations, people think I'm going to start with this conversation about, the data that drives their enterprise. And we'll certainly get there. But what I'd like to do instead is go right to the end game. Let's focus as you on the marketers and the way that you have to go about improving the performance of your business. And when we really look at the core crux of what analytics is all about and its value, it's all about driving the impact and value of the decisions that are made in your organization. What's a decision? Well, when I think about a decision as you or a marketer have, it might be, yes, I'm going to invest in my email channel. Yes, I am going to, send a cross-sell offer to my most loyal customers. No, I'm not going to pursue business in this particular market. These are the challenges that marketers face every day. And so when we think then about the application of analytics, we have to start with that decision maker. Okay, so here's my decision maker. You can see he's a happy decision maker. He's got a smile. He's getting excited for a baseball season, so he's got a baseball cap on. The key to a decision maker, though, is they wake up every day and have some question that they're trying to ask. They're dealing with a particular issue. Should I invest in this area or should I not? And the way that that person makes decisions with analytics is they leverage insight. Now, when I say the word analytics or I say the word insight to you, what kind of things come to mind? Now, you might think about, for example, the Excel spreadsheet that gets dropped on your desk about all the leads that got generated from our campaign. Oftentimes, though, if we're thinking really sophisticated, maybe we're thinking, you as the CMO over there, you're thinking about that high-res dashboard that you have to get generated once a month to take to your business reviews. It has things like forecasts and maybe share a brand portfolio and maybe some traffic lights on our pipeline, transactional details, the dashboard, a classic embodiment of what people think about when they think about analytics, right? What's interesting now, especially those of us in the marketing profession are realizing that this expectation from the corporate enterprise, we're seeing a significant shift in the mindsets of what our business constituents care about. They're immediately shifting from this world that I can just have a high-res dashboard that I access when it gets emailed to me, or even that I access in a central portal. That expectation is just not hitting the mark. And why is that? Well, it has to do with the fact that people like you and people like me go home every day and they see their kids that came home from junior high school on their cell phones, and they have better updates on what's going on with, the junior high kids' crush on the boy next door than they do on the realities of their business. The expectations for what people need to be able to do, is being impacted by the world of consumer technology. And that changes the way that we start to think about how analytics impacts decision making. Jonathan, maybe you could show us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take on the role of a CEO for a major telecommunications company. And it turns out I'm never at home. I'm never in my office. I'm never in front of my laptop. I'm on an airplane a lot. I'm driving from customer meeting to customer meeting. So I don't have the opportunity to go out and look at my dashboards like I used to, but I still need information as to how good my business is doing as of today. And luckily, I now can do that through my mobile application. So as you can see, I have my standard dashboard view, but I have an interactive view to start driving into some of the questions that I'd like to see. For example, right now at the top, I'm looking at the service plan metrics for my broadband division. But if I want to very quickly, say, look at my family plans instead, I can just drag and drop and just use a flip of my finger to go ahead and switch to my different family plan metrics. And very quickly on the right-hand I see my churn rate is very, very high. It's 11%. We're losing 11% of our customers as of today when compared to this same time last year. That's a negative 0.8% growth. So a big issue for me. On the left-hand side, I can understand how the revenue is happening within all of my different geographies. And I don't know if that's too difficult to see. Maybe you need to lower the lights for a second. But I can see my micro trend lines on the far left are showing me how revenue has changed. So I can very quickly just glance at these and get a lot of information, such as the Northeast is actually trending upward, but the Southeast, I see a very large dip lately in how our revenue is doing. And putting these two items together, maybe I am concerned with my campaign effectiveness and how it's changing. So if I change my filter so that I'm looking at the most recent quarter, I can notice my family pack marketing campaign is at a very, very low amount of effectiveness. So if I'm going to call someone up, maybe I do need to call the CMO and understand what we're going on with that marketing plan and dive into solving that issue. Now, the Southeast does cause me some concern still, so I may want to dig in specifically to the Southeast, and I can drill into my churn rate and the number of deactivations specifically for that geography. So I'll go ahead and highlight that and drill into the year-to-date deactivations and understand if there's more information that I can gather from what's going on with that part of my business. Click on that and allow it to expand here. And one thing that I quickly see is I can see the number of activations is getting better. So this is a positive trend for me, that we've had more new activations in Q2 versus Q1. But switching to deactivation shows me a different story. It shows me that there are some continued issues with the number of people leaving our business, so much so that in Q2 we saw it skyrocketed compared to the rest of this year, and especially compared to Q2 of last year. Now, we've managed to actually include within my mobile dashboard now predictive capabilities. So by checking that checkbox, now I can see what the forecast is going to look like for the next 6 months. And I see the problem is not really going to get any better if I compare Q4 of this year versus Q4 of last year, the number of deactivations is skyrocketing. So all these things are highlighting issues that I need to dig down into as the CEO. So I'm going to highlight these two items. And I'm going to circle my Q4 predicted value and my Q4 value from last year, show somebody the growth is actually getting very high, and I'm going to send that as an email instantly right from my mobile device so that I can have my CMO start to dig in and understand what's causing issues with this problem.
So Jonathan, when we start to look at an application like this, we can start to see that the expectations are changing for people. We're dealing with a new motif of how people just expect to do business. But I think the important point also is calling out the importance of insight to these decision makers. You're digging into the issues that are known questions to you, and then you can change the policies and you can change the strategies of what might be causing this performance. Now at IBM, this is really half the equation. We've been a pioneer and a leader in this space of providing analytics to provide insight to decision makers for a long time. But what we're seeing is a significant shift not only to the type of device people are using from insight, but to the types of people that are actually being impacted by the output of analytics. Now, we're really talking about how we shift to the world of driving action. What do I mean by action? Well, in the last 24 hours, we dealt with, for example, a huge challenge in the area we are today. We had a big winter storm hit. Now, if you're a call center manager, and you're dealing with, for example, how many people should come to work, or how I should deal with particular, fees that I might give for changes. What happens if all of a sudden there's a 14-inch blizzard that drops on a city in the Midwest? You might have to be thinking about new ways to deal with things. And specifically, the people that might have to deal with that specifically might be the call center people themselves. So put yourself in the mind, for example, here I am, I've got somebody who's sitting in a snowstorm all over the Midwest, okay? and they call in on the call center world, and they want to change their flight. And the person on the end of the line has to decide right then and there, am I going to give this loyal customer a change fee based upon what's going on with the weather, yes or no? The simple solution would be I'd highly configure it. No, sorry, that's how your ticket was, you'll do it. But you know, in some situations, like a situation of inclement weather, what if we need to change the policy to, in real time to deal with the nuance that this customer is very loyal to us? And if we deal well with this particular customer as they're dealing with, you know, a problem with the weather on their plane ticket, they might increase their loyalty to us in the long run. You know, if that example doesn't, you know, strike you as we just got done with travel, you're getting ready to go on spring break, put it this way. What if instead of this customer going in and, you know, and still being impacted by the weather, but now they're thinking about booking, you know, a ticket to go on vacation. This person goes and they hit your website. And effectively, they're hitting your enterprise application, your website, and the system has to decide right here, what offer should I be posing back to that customer to actually get that person to upgrade to a nice vacation, you know, down to Florida? How can I go about deciding and having my system take an action, take the next best action to deliver the optimal outcome associated with this particular client? This is where analytics is going. Your website doesn't sit around and dig through reports to figure out what offer to give somebody. Your call center rep doesn't have time to dig through piles of dashboards or even look at a mobile device and look at a bunch of metrics. They have to know, right now, what should I be doing to drive the right interaction? So this is where we're going. We need to get to the point where we can act, not only provide insight to decision makers, but drive an action that will deliver the business outcome we want. You in the marketing area, we might be focused on optimizing the results of every single campaign, increasing the click-through rate in a particular email campaign. There's a lot of different options we can have to do this, but we've got to start with the data that we have to make that decision. So let's talk a little bit about the data that we have in our organizations to figure out what kind of things might be making an impact on our business. It really starts out with, you know, the classic information that I might have in my enterprise, the traditional data, you know, traditional data like the information in my data warehouse. What kind of things do we typically store in our data warehouses? We've got our transactions. We might have some descriptive information, like data, for example, about people's demographics, the information that they might have stored about the size of their family. These are the kinds of things that fit well into the rows and columns of your highly structured data environment. Now, in the old days of the original invention of BI, the theory was we would get all the data for your enterprise into this one data warehouse. Well, we invited some of our friends from IT over here into the session, and one of the questions that we had in an earlier discussion, which they chuckled at, was, how many times have you finished your data warehouse project this year? And the reality is that there's no possible way that you're ever going to get all the data into your data warehouse to make decisions. Why is that? Well, for those of you on this side of the room, our marketing organization, it's that pesky business again. You're constantly having to deal with the realities of your customer base, right? You're constantly dealing with changes in the marketplace. And so you're often looking for data in different places. You might have data marts that exist in different places. You've got probably some Excel spreadsheets that, you know, include information you might have gathered from, you know, from interactions with your sales force. This distributed data ends up making a huge impact on the level of clarity that you can have in your decision-making processes. So we have to have a process that can take into account not only the data in our data warehouse, but also the distributed data inside of our environments. Both of these types of data are, if you will, what would often be considered just the traditional, highly structured data, the kind of information we've been managing for a long time. But now we start to hear these new words float our way, right? We start to hear about big data. And big data doesn't just mean, you know, the data warehouse getting bigger and having terabytes instead of, you know, gigabytes worth of data. What we're talking about is new data types. Okay? We talk about not only the volume of the data, but the variety of the data. For example, we'll start dealing with unstructured information. And you're in the marketing organization. You can probably think of some of the information that you'd have that could give you better perspectives on the behaviors and thoughts of your particular customers. So for example, maybe you've got call center notes that would give you a better understanding of what makes people like and not like interactions with you. Okay? Maybe you have services logs. After a product has been installed, you go and you get notes and feedback based upon, hey, here's what we did in this particular client's location. So logs can end up making an impact here. This unstructured information adds a richness to our perspective that exists in our structured data. There's actually a special example of unstructured data out there that we're starting to see explode a lot. And I know we have folks here from our social media group who aren't going to be surprised here at all to have me put up, a relationship to social media. Whether it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's, the postcard, Instagram things. All of these different data sources can help me gain a perspective on emerging attitudes and opinions that exist inside of our customer base. Dealing with emerging issues is a key idea behind social media. But it's important to understand that we're not just talking about using social media as a monitoring system whereby my customers can complain to me, and when somebody complains about me, I ship them a free product. Rather, it's important that we have an ability to take our social media data and put it in context of all the other information. And why is that? Well, the reason is because there's a lot of noise out there, isn't there? There's a lot of stuff out in social media that isn't really necessarily valuable to you. Okay? There's places where there's key ideas that are very obviously important because they're talking about your brand, but there might be corollary and parallel industries that don't naturally have a relationship to you. For example, I'm working with a hotel chain, and they're particularly focused on the brand sentiment for lost luggage for airlines. And the reason is because they're thinking about launching a customer service product where they will actually buy the little tracking device for lost luggage, and they will make it part of their Gold Premium rewards program, and they will actually track your lost luggage. And they want to actually target their customers that are dealing with airlines that have more lost luggage. So using that social media as an insight on something that's not even their business ends up adding a huge idea. So having social media to help us understand emerging issues, keep a pulse on those issues we think are important. When I uncover something that I believe might be important to me, this is where we can start to leverage traditional techniques that we might have in, say, survey research to proactively gather feedback from our customers to find out what kind of things they need. Survey research is interesting because a lot of people think that it's just relegated, to your market research department or the little punch cards that you stick in your cell phone, that you send back. But market research and that whole process of feedback management, which is really how IBM views that idea, is how we go about proactively gathering data that we don't have. Maybe there's a piece of missing information about the size of a family that you need to have. We can leverage a feedback management platform to go about getting that data to fill in our overarching perspective. Now finally, any conversation with IBM is never finished if we don't link immediately to those things you see on the commercials. And so we like to talk a lot about the final source of data being sensor information. I do a lot of work with telecommunications companies, and they're all about tracking when your phone call drops. And if the phone call drops, what action am I going to take? How can I use that information in the context of the customer's experience and the amount they're paying to determine whether or not the amount of dropped calls they're having is going to cause this person to leave? So sensor data ends up being a huge opportunity in data, in terms of data variety. So as you can see, we've got a lot of options. And as we work with you, on our ongoing conversations, we will be exploring the different kinds of data we can apply to different kinds of decisions. But it all starts with that. It starts with the decisions that we want to make in the organization. In order to link these two together, I have to really bring together the kinds of analytics that will allow me to suck out the value of that underlying data. Okay? So let me take you through our perspective in terms of what it takes to put together an analytics platform that will enable us to support both of these decision-making types. Okay? So let's start out with the problem that exists with this data, which says, I got a ton of this stuff. It's all over the place. It's a mess. People have different versions of the truth. It's scattered in different environments. How can I go about having a mechanism to simplify my access to this data? And what IBM has done is we've gone through and we've literally invested in technologies that allow us to link to data where it is and define common data definitions across this underlying information. We have technologies not only within our business analytics software brand, but in our other software brands like information management that allow us to gain access to this data in a lot of different types in the mechanisms that make the most sense for the business. Now, this really creates the main value for the IT organization. Because IT has concerns around governance, they have concerns around costs, and if I have a mechanism to simplify my access and storage to this underlying data, I can drive a huge impact to my bottom line IT costs. So I put together a data foundation built on this concept of simplification. And now what I need to do is I need to start extracting value from it. And this is where the core of business intelligence comes into being. So imagine, if you will, I've got a lot of data in my enterprise. And what I need to do is I need to extract value from it so that my decision makers can do something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to define, if you will, the rows and columns associated with my data that help me gain access to it appropriately. I'm going to organize my data. Okay? And when I organize that information, it's going to allow me to answer the questions that I have predetermined will be asked. Right? I'm going to determine the measures, like return on marketing investment. I'm going to determine the dimensions, like by region, like we saw in Jonathan's demo. The Southeast region versus the Northeast region, by product line. In other words, the mechanisms that I need to be able to generate maybe the reports that I might generate, or even the multidimensional analysis capabilities, the cubes that I can spin that we all like to have. Everybody used a pivot table? Now the idea is if I organize my data appropriately, I can gain access to ask the question the way I want to. And it puts it in the hands of the decision maker to ask it in the way they want to. Okay, so this is all very powerful, but there's a problem with this, isn't there? What's the problem that exists when I organize the data? Well, it gets back to that dilemma we were talking about with the data warehouse thing between the IT organization and the business. The business is pesky in that it always changes its mind. It changes its mind in terms of the kinds of decisions you want to make, and therefore the kinds of insight that you need. And what if you guessed wrong? What happened if you organized your data to include, the Southeast region, and that's the level of granularity you generated, but whoops, you realized that it was actually one neighborhood inside that Southeast region that's causing the problem. It's become particularly critical in the public sector. In elections going on right now, we're getting to the point where the political parties are actually splicing down to the neighborhood level, down to the street level, to figure out the sentiment of voters. Okay? If I would have configured that in my BI cube, it would have stopped at, say, the 60564 area code, zip code. Area code, that'd be interesting. That'd be a long area code. Okay? So, but the 60564 zip code doesn't give me the granularity to know whether or not I should send somebody out to walk the streets, in this particular area to drum up votes. So we've got to have another mechanism in place to augment our ability to organize the data to help us drive decisions. And that's where the premise of modeling comes into play. The premise of modeling starts with this idea, again, with the same idea that I have a lot of the data. Remember, we're getting virtual access to the data based upon our simplified platform. And what we're doing in this case is we're taking all the data and we're throwing it in a bucket. Okay, so we throw it into a nice virtual bucket. And based upon that virtual bucket now, I take the power of parallel computing and I point it at all the data and I say, go ask every possible question there is to know about this data and tell me what's interesting. Okay? Go look for the aha moment in this data. I don't know what it is. I just know I want to know whether voters are going to show up and vote for my candidate or not. Other than that, I don't know what's important. You figure it out. And the computer goes through and it finds the relationships in the underlying data. And the output of this is what we call a model. Now, a model is oftentimes is usually easiest to understand by analogy. So you can think about this sort of like, for example, you ever made orange juice? Okay, if you make orange juice, what do? You take an orange, you cut it in half, and then you squeeze it on that little squeezer thing, right? Now it comes all the juice, and then you throw the rind away. The value of the orange has been sucked out, okay? Unless you like eating orange peels or something like that. But just go with me here for a second. When I look at my underlying data, it works very much like that. Modeling takes all of my data and squeezes it and extracts all the value out of that data for dealing with the particular challenge I want. And it creates this lightweight thing that allows me to predict what kind of things are going to happen. It allows me to put some data in and get predictions out. And that's what we mean by predictive analytics. The whole idea is I can start to take inputs, outputs, and that gives me a better perspective and an augmented perspective on top of what I might have organized in my data. But best of all, this doesn't live in a vacuum. Both of these kinds of data are brought together in an integrated way so that decision makers can collaborate and plan what they want to do next. What do I mean by that? I now take the insights that I've already defined that I care about, okay, and I might, for example, give people, using predictive, I might give them a forecast of all the kind of things, but I also am looking across data, across history, across effectively all time horizons. I can look at the back, I can look what's going on now from a monitoring standpoint, and I can look what's going on in the future. And now, these decision makers can ask what-if questions, okay? So they can effectively pose, what would happen if I invested more in the Southeast? What would happen if I switched more of my investment dollars to the Midwest versus the Southeast? Would that impact my churn rate in our example from before? The idea behind this environment is it allows the decision makers to blend the value of the data that's been organized for them and the value of what's been extracted by advanced analytics in one integrated platform. And this fills out our capability to drive this insight. It's typically where a lot of organizations start when they think about advanced and predictive analytics. They talk about how they can fold that into their generally integrated workspace for people to make decisions. Okay, but we still got this problem down on the bottom. I've got to be able to drive this concept of the next best action. It's not about generating reports for these people, is it? It's about driving a specific outcome we want to have. In order to do that, I have to scale, to huge levels. For example, I've got to scale all the way to the point where I've got 1,000 call center agents, getting offers all the time, or 100,000 people hitting your website. So now what I have to do, I've got to start with this idea that I have to create a scalable infrastructure for my analytics. And what IBM has invested in with our pure systems infrastructure is we've gone through and we've looked at all the types of analytic approaches that are used in an enterprise, and we've actually taken the key functions of those and pushed them down into our technology platforms, creating integrated approaches of hardware, software, and services to actually take the best practices and push them down to the physical level. This means I can deal with more data. This means I can deal with more decisions. It means I can do it faster than ever, okay? This includes dealing with things that allow us to index unstructured data and actually make it available to decision makers in the context of the classic transactional metrics that they care about. All of this idea gives us this power and this platform now to be able to scale decisions. And that allows us to drive to the last step in our equation. Putting together a platform that allows us to automate the analytic processes necessary for us to be able to embed the output of our analytics right into these point of interaction systems. This is a whole concept that's talked about in the market called decision management. And what we're doing is we're fusing together the power of predictive models combined with the business logic of business decision makers in the form of rules, and then we combine it with the issues and constraints, the objectives and the constraints of you as the business decision maker. So you've only got $500,000 to invest. Where should you invest it? This whole concept of automating these analytic processes and then embedding the output of this allows you now to take care of these examples. I'm going to give you one last example of this application of next best action. One of the things we're seeing a lot of in IBM, again, linking back to this concept of sensors, we're starting to see data coming at us in speeds that have never happened before. So for example, imagine now you're driving down the road, okay, and your cell phone drops. Your cell phone drops the call. And amazing, 5 minutes later you get an SMS and crash your car because you were reading a text. But you got a text message saying, we're sorry, you seem to keep having dropped calls on I-95. We're going to give you a 15% discount on this month's bill. Apologize for the inconvenience. This is where we start talking about the events flowing through your environment, actually changing the outcomes and behaviors of what goes on inside of your enterprise. This is what we call the premise of streaming analytics. And streaming analytics brings together this whole idea of the automated platform and pushes it all the way to a speed level that's never been seen in the world before. Best of all, across this entire approach, when I take an action, right, change an outcome, change a policy of what kind of thing is going on, this whole system creates a learning loop. It allows us to go through and have this system learn from itself so that the outcome can start to drive it. So what I'd like to do now is close out with a final demonstration from Jonathan so that you can understand the concept of what we mean when we say smarter analytics.
Great, thanks again, Rob. So now I'm not the CEO anymore of a telecommunications company. I'm actually a manager of our call center. And, excuse me, there you go. And you know what? My call center representatives are very well respected by the organization, but they don't get dashboards like the CEO does or some fancy business intelligence reports they look at on a regular basis. My folks work in the call center application on a regular basis. Right? The only dashboard they see is probably the dashboard on their 87 Ford Escort. Right? Just one person laughed. So, you know what? I've been a call center manager for a long time, so I respect the experience that my call center representatives have in doing their job. But sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes they deal incorrectly with the customer. Or the policy that we set at a high level is wrong. I used to be the call center director for DirecTV. And DirecTV has a package called NFL Sunday Ticket. And we used to have a policy that if somebody called up on the phone complaining about NFL Sunday Ticket and threatening to quit, that we would instantly give them a 25% discount that year on NFL Sunday Ticket so they would sign up again. But what I quickly realized is that policy wasn't working because we were having the same customers call every single year asking for the 25% discount, right? My call center representatives didn't know to do anything better. They just knew, hey, if I want to keep this customer, they're complaining, I better give them a discount. We needed a better way of doing it. So what we did is when I came over to the telecommunications company here, is we've actually implemented all the things that we've talked about today within our call center application. So when somebody calls up on the phone and I instantly understand who they are, the system through the call center application presents me information on this individual. For example, now I see I'm talking to Kathy Moran, and she has a personal account with us, and she owns wireless technology, digital TV, internet, and DSL. So instantly I understand information about Kathy. I know that she has only 6 months left on her contract, so right now is a very key time for her as a customer. It's a time where she may start shopping around if she's unhappy with something. But also embedded behind the scenes, even though I don't know it as the call center representative, there's a lot of information that's being driven from here from some of the things that Rob was talking about. Things like Kathy's social media usage. I can see that it's high. And whether or not she's a social media network influencer. I've been able to collect some of that new modern age data and implement it into the front end so my call center representatives are given that access. And you know what? All of that information, such as whether or not she's a social media influencer, is put into the predictions and the metrics behind the scenes in that model that Rob was talking about that drive things such as Kathy's overall satisfaction, her price sensitivity, as well as her propensity to churn. So when Kathy calls up, I can start to have a conversation with her, and right off the bat, I'm given approval to offer her a next best offer. Because of everything we know about Kathy, because of her usage, because she has 6 months left on her contract, I'm able to try to give her a cross-sell offer right off the bat for unlimited text messages. And I understand that we have an 80% likelihood of her accepting that offer. So right off the bat, I can present that offer to Kathy and see if she'd be interested in taking us up on that cross-sell. Whether or not she accepts it or not, very quickly I'm going to get to the reason why Kathy is calling. And today, Kathy is mad. Kathy, I guess, has a boyfriend named Rob Risney, and he's just a jerk. I guess he still has a wife, and I don't know what's going on there. That's not the only reason she's mad. She's also mad because she recently had a rate change with her service. And she's mad that she's spending more money to us on a regular basis and receiving the same level of service. So customer is unhappy with her recent rate change. So just like I do for anything that comes through the call center, I'm adding these notes from my discussion with Kathy into my call center application. So next time she calls, we understand that we had this conversation. If she talks to one of the other tens of thousands of call center reps we have, they can get caught up on her case. And I'm embedding that within the application like I always would. But unique now to the system, now that we've implemented the IBM technology as I understand it, is when I submit that into the call center application, instantly there's text analytics that are going to be happening behind the scenes. It's going to understand the sentiment of this issue that Kathy is having. So automatically the system is going to understand that she's unhappy, this is going to have a negative impact on her satisfaction, and actually may cause her propensity to churn to increase significantly. So you'll notice all this happens automatically for the call center representative when they submit this. That text analytics sentiment analysis happens, and now I notice that Kathy has the highest level of propensity to churn possible. So as her call center representative, this is a problem. I need to solve it. I have all this experience in dealing with customers, but I don't really know what to do. Luckily, I have embedded within the system a next best offer suggestion that I could utilize to solve this problem and save Kathy as a customer. In this case, I now have instant approval to offer her a retention offer. I'm going to give her a free iPhone and data package if she accepts it and signs up for another year on her contract. And I can see that we have a 70% likelihood of taking it. So unlike my DirecTV days, where I might have had permission to offer this to every single customer, now I only have permission when this is presented to me as an offer based on the analytics that's happening automatically behind the scenes. Not only am I trying to save Kathy, but I'm being presented with the best offer to give me the opportunity to save her. So I present this to Kathy. She'll go ahead and in this case she accepts that offer. And again, I'm adding that information into the system, which automatically lowers her propensity to churn to some of the lowest available levels and increases her satisfaction overall. Because now, like Rob discussed, the system is now learning from my experiences in the call center. So over time, our interaction with our customers will get even better.
So Jonathan, I think what's great about what you showed there is that it just sort of brings together all the different pieces that we've talked about. It showed in that last application how actually we've taken business intelligence and flipped it on its head. Now it's about operational intelligence and the insights now being transformed into something that can help somebody have better context in what they're doing. But importantly, we took data as it was flowing through, in fact, even unstructured data, and that information has directly impacted the decisions that were created. You probably have a system in your marketing organization. Maybe you've got a Unica platform or a Primo, and that's actually something where you're defining the different offers. Wouldn't it be great if you could augment that with some ability to have analytics help you coach which kind of offer would actually fold into the system? Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk through this point of view with you. What we typically do from this point is we like to work with smaller groups and actually start to do some brainstorming. Where could different analytics approaches, make an impact in your world? What kinds of decisions are you making today where more insight would make a big impact? And where are there opportunities for us to focus on a roadmap to get you to the point where you can have an analytics platform that drives the next best action? Thanks for your opportunity today, and we look forward to working with you.
Did you spin out?
I did.